Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim Jousma, and joining me is the greatest legal mind in the Pacific Northwest. If I do say so myself, it is Professor Aubrey.
Hello.
All right, we are here today for a Wednesday episode, and I think we're going to be doing something rather interesting here. What do you think?
I think it should be interesting as long as people don't expect us to know too much about Led Zeppelin. I mean, me at least. But the episode, that was a little bit of a spoiler. Spoiler, the episode is about Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, the reason it's about Led Zeppelin is this. It all started with a YouTube video. A lot of my viewing preferences do tend to be YouTube channels. And there are a lot of great YouTube channels out there with some great content, including one. The channel's name is Polyphonic. And he puts on some high quality, just examinations of music, whether it be the music itself or, things around music as well. It's really nice. I mean, the videos themselves are pretty much bite-sized, so you're not sitting around for 3 hours or anything like that, but he has a lot of information from, everything I've seen. I trust him to have sources for his material and all that. This is a professional type production, and he is currently doing Led Zeppelin month. And but it's interesting, he's not doing this necessarily as a fan. He's doing an actual critical look on Led Zeppelin, and the video I saw was titled Led Zeppelin and Cultural Appropriation.
That's exactly right. And you suggested that we watch that together.
Indeed. So what we are going to do is this. The whole premise of the Led Zeppelin and Cultural Appropriation video on the Polyphonic channel, the start of it shows scenes from the movie The Song Remains the Same, which is available on HBO Max. And he said that when he saw it and they did the crowd shots, it kind of intrigued him a bit that most of the crowd was white, despite the fact that Zeppelin's music comes from an African American heritage, Mm-hmm. So it did what I feel was an honest and fair look. I don't think that I do not feel this video, the Polyphonic video, is necessarily. This is not a hit job against Zeppelin. It is just an honest look at not only Zeppelin but other white musicians of that era that did have their their music was inspired by, African Americans and whatnot. So what I thought we will do is...
Derivative of,
correct. So what I thought we would do is this. We're going to do two things. One, after we go to the musical interlude here, the professor and I are not only going to rewatch that Polyphonic video, which in the show notes you will have a link to the Polyphonic YouTube page. I definitely recommend checking them out if you're a fan of music or just simply good documentaries. And then we are also going to go to HBO Max and watch Led Zeppelin and The Song Remains the Same. And then when we come back from our musical interlude, we'll kind of have a discussion of both at once. What do you think about that?
Sounds good to me, Tim.
Anything off the top of your head that you're hoping to maybe discuss when we come back?
I'm very interested because in watching what we've watched so far of the Polyphonic video, it has seemed to me he's not saying anything new. Mm-hmm. It's not, so I guess in that sense it's not shocking, this idea that rock and roll music came from black music and was appropriated and then blacks were excluded from it. Like, nobody thought there were... I guess there was this myth, post-segregation, post-integration. Mm-hmm. There sort of came up this myth, where I grew up in the South, that to the extent there was separation, people just wanted it that way. And so there wasn't this thought of, why are there only white people on MTV? Because I hadn't had any exposure to anything other than that. So because of this social stratification, the justification of which was people prefer it that way. Everybody's happier that way. And I remember as a child believing that was, just thinking that was just a normal state of being.
Yeah. I would say for me, I know when I first saw the Polyphonic video, it did make me self-reflect a bit, and I'll go into it after the musical interlude here, but it did make me think about how little I was exposed to African-American culture. Whether it be music. Now, granted, and again, we'll go into this a little further, I do feel that some of the artists mentioned in the Polyphonic video, like the Rolling Stones, I think are good stewards in the sense that, they were definitely influenced by African-American culture, and then they went out of their way to tell people that and, give opportunities that may not have been there, whereas Led Zeppelin has had issues of stealing stuff and not necessarily given attribution that, where it came from, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. I think that's a good introduction here. So kick back, relax, enjoy that musical interlude. And when we get back, we're going to give you our thoughts, not only on the Polyphonic video called Led Zeppelin and Cultural Appropriation, but the concert movie, The Song Remains the Same. All right, we are back. We are done watching the Polyphonic video, Led Zeppelin and Cultural Appropriation, as well as much of the song remains the same as we both could take.
Yeah, we did not finish it. I think we have to admit that right from the get-go, we were not able to finish. The song remains the same. So you can take that as you will. Perhaps that it was a little bit boring.
I say this as someone who has seen Robert Plant and Jimmy Page in concert. I found the film boring. It's like after the first 19 minutes, you had said pause to go to the restroom, and then I hit pause without looking at the time first. But after you had left the room, and I saw it was only 19 minutes, and that first 19 minutes had this long segment where their manager dressed like a 20s gangster and just started going to their houses delivering letters. You saw Robert Plant's naked kids, and they had 5, 6 years old, so that was stop,
Right, those are going to be adult humans someday, and now they're going to be naked on film for the whole world to see.
Yeah, and whatever. Whatever. Just I just didn't like the film at all, and I don't think for what I've liked about Led Zeppelin over the years, it didn't capture.
It really didn't. It felt like watching a documentary, as opposed to being transported to the show. And, I mentioned, first of all, I did not enjoy the gangster part either. If I put myself back in the sort of heady and fervent adoration of Led Zeppelin, right, when they were kings of the world, mm-hmm. They would have felt like people would be interested in seeing little clips of their houses and little clips of them with their kids and little clips. You know what I'm saying? So I can see why they put that stuff in. I think that's why it was a way to let the fans connect with the home lives of the artists. But it was so weird and contrived and just not interesting at all. They could have had little interview snippets of them at home saying, were they excited to go on tour or, speaking.
Yeah, that's probably my biggest thing. We talked about this. There are a number of other concert films out there that are either all straight concert or mix of concert and documentary. We have stuff like Gimme Shelter, Woodstock.
Don't Look Back.
Metallica did a movie. I forgot the name of it, but it was a concert movie that did have a little minor storyline thread throughout, which, again, I felt was better because there was more of a better in the sense that you could lose yourself a little bit more in it. Whereas with The Song Remains the Same, it was, this was like this is why Spinal Tap is a thing.
I mean, it was, so when I was watching it, because I've seen Spinal Tap dozens of times, and it's one of my favorite films, and I had never seen Song Remains the Same before, and the whole time I was like, it's a shot-for-shot remake of Spinal Tap.
Just by people that don't realize that, they're a joke.
Right. People who are not seeing the funniness. And that's why I say the sort of headiness of that time, what it must have been for members of the band and people who worked with them to have that much social capital all at one time. Mm-hmm. In the 70s, when, let's face it, we were not a forward-looking... the 70s, I think, was an era when young people were seeking to enjoy the liberation that had been generated in the prior decade. Mm-hmm. In the 80s, of course, HIV and AIDS come in and sort of changes how that's working. But that really is an identifiable era in American history, I think, certainly culturally. That time between the civil rights movement and HIV/AIDS. And they were, the leaders of that time. And I just think they couldn't make good art because they were blinded by their own importance, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because that's what it feels like. It's just a very self-important, self-congratulatory, you're interested in every drip of sweat that comes off my brow kind of performance and film.
Or the camera on Robert Plant the entire time was like aimed at his crotch looking up.
Yep.
But that is what it is. And there's another concert film from The Who. The slightly older band, but the kids are all right. And that was, again, concert footage, but again, much better because it showed you the band's homes, but it gave just, interview clips. It didn't do this fantasy stuff that they did. But that's a funny thing.
Had the fantasy actually been about something that I associate with Led Zeppelin, which is a little bit more psychedelic than a mobster. I feel like they just got really stoned and were like, you should be dressed as a mobster, man. You come and get all... They were indulgent. Yeah. They weren't talking to the audience. They were barely inviting the audience in to just watch them be themselves without much thought about the art product. And I just don't... when you see good art, it has a point of view and it's communicating to you.
Now, let's tie that into the Polyphonic video. We did, before we start recording here, have a bit of a discussion about what we wanted to talk about. And it's this video did kind of, and it's sad that it only came out a day ago, but, when I saw it, it did make me really think about how there really is a kind of a clear mark in the late 60s on when there was a split on who enjoyed what type of music. And, hearing you speak about Zeppelin, it's I think of the Stones, and even though the Stones, you could probably say, are just as guilty of cultural appropriation in some ways as they are, the Stones, I will go to my grave defending them for this because, they took Muddy Waters on tour. They commonly, they did work with Howlin' Wolf. They commonly in interviews would talk about all their influences from the African-American culture. In the 80s, on the anniversary of Chuck Berry, Keith Richards put out a concert movie with Chuck Berry. So it's they've gone out of their way to talk about their influences, and
also to I think they could have. So to me, and what has been communicated to me lately, in the last 10 years, is there's financial benefits that have been flowing through the white community from this type of appropriation for generations. And that wealth gets accumulated and compounded. The same thing is happening in the black community, except things are being taken away. So even when, it's just like that Marvin Gaye song, before I get any money, you've already taken it all. It's like before I can even perfect my art form, you've taken it, and you're reaping all the financial benefits. And those benefits should be partially mine, because this stuff came out of my head like a vision from God.
Yeah, I mean, like they brought up Little Richard in the video, and like look at his history. Like when his music first started hitting it big, he was working in a diner. Still working in a diner when his music was on the radio, yet like Elvis Presley was already doing like Louisiana Hayride and already making it famous, and how, like Pat Boone would have a bigger hit with the same song that Little Richard, like singing the same lyrics with the same music background, just the white version, and then that would be better. And like it's like
it was a conscious erasing of black voices, and that has hurt and continues to harm the black community. Even if we stop doing it today, which we have not stopped doing it today, I haven't stopped doing it, and I bet you haven't either, but it's still pulling resources out of that community that should go back to that community. And, I think we as individuals, it's just like when we were thinking 20 years ago about what can I do? Like, I've been told there's a crisis with the environment. What do I do? And I think a lot of us struggled for a long time about our personal contributions and the, choices and compromises that our lives promoted. And it's kind of the same thing with appropriation. Like, we have to begin to question when we're consuming any kind of art, when we're learning any kind of art, where did that art come from? Find its roots and pay homage at least, but pay money too, right? Find the person who came up with the new dance craze and pay them for a dance lesson.
In a weird way, this reminds me of comic books, and something we've discussed on the show before too. And I think when I'm done explaining, you'll get what I mean by that. But take a look at all of the characters that you see in movies today, whether it's Marvel movies or DC movies, and think about all the billions of dollars that these companies have made. And then go to Twitter, and then you find out that the people who created these characters for the comic books are lucky to get tickets to go to the movie. They have to create GoFundMes for medical issues, while characters that they created are making billions of dollars for other people. And there's it's obviously the comic books, the comic book situation is going to be different than, when it comes to music, but there's similarities there in the fact that people that don't have power are getting screwed by the people that do have the power.
Which has its parallels in almost every performance or art or creation kind of job. And not only that, any kind of job. And so I was going to try, because it's the same in professional wrestling too. The people are fighting their way to get into that industry and are essentially abused until they're successful. And so there's so many of us who struggle to do things and believe in doing those things and spend a lot of time, energy, and money trying to train ourselves to do those things. And it's not successful. Like, not everybody's going to be successful at stuff. I have failed at many things in my life. That doesn't make trying them less fun, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think for me, you can boil it all down to capitalism, really, because it's motivated by greed. It's not necessarily motivated by, I don't know what motivated people to do what they did, but I know what motivates people today, and that's cash.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you can look at even the COVID vaccine situation. People are now being paid to get their COVID vaccines. If you go get your first COVID vaccine today at a COVID clinic in Portland, Oregon, you get a gift card for $100.
Fuck.
If you get your second shot, you get a gift card for $50.
Why did I do it early?
Because we're trying to get communities vaccinated. And what is the number one way to motivate people to do stuff? Give them money. It's an amazing thing. It is a symbolic currency that you can trade for just about anything. Mm-hmm. So it is incredibly valuable. And basically my point is, people motivated by greed will railroad anybody they can. And when there are defined and pervasively oppressed lower classes in any society, they're going to be the ones that get taken advantage of to the benefit of the wealthier ones. And, I don't believe that humans are by nature greedy or jealous. I mean, I think those are scarcity mindsets that are encouraged by capitalism, that are necessary for capitalism. And so in that sense, we're groomed from the time we're infants to participate in this system that results in things like The Song Remains the Same.
Yeah.
A really boring movie about a bunch of white guys who stood on stage and played some music that at the time was really exciting for people, but at this point, we've all heard it. So it's not at all interesting to look at or anything. The lighting is bad. There was nothing dynamic about it. The music I wasn't inspired by the music. It didn't focus on it didn't focus on Jimmy Page during solos, for example. Like, you didn't get a feel for the individuals playing the music. You just saw Robert Plant up there preening and singing in a way that doesn't feel the same way it does for me when Mick Jagger does it. When Mick Jagger does it, you have this perception from the audience that he is trying to entertain the fuck out of you. Like, if you were in bed with him, he would be doing every possible thing to make sure you were having a good time.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas you look at Robert Plant and you see him, laid up in the bed, surrounded by a dozen women who are like licking him all over, and he's just like half asleep. And that's how I felt during the movie. Just to bring it back around.
Yeah, and to be clear, we do like Led Zeppelin. But one thing about
I love Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin was incredibly influential on me as a teenager.
Same.
And I listened to it all the time when I was 16 and, until I was in my probably early 30s.
And like I said, I mean, I've seen Jimmy Page and Robert Plant in concert in '97. Robert Plant opened for The Who, so I've seen Robert Plant in concert twice. The purpose of this is not to knock Led Zeppelin. The purpose of this, and it was touched upon in the Polyphonic video, and which I really am glad that they did, is people need to more critically assess the art that comes into their life. And they need to acknowledge when the artists in question are not the best of people or obtained that art in ways that maybe they should not have, or just didn't do enough to show appreciation, and I think people...
And I think you got to internalize that and realize it's your job to show appreciation. And so how you're going to do that is you're going to consume artists who are also appreciative, or original artists and local artists. And I know that all costs money. And so I want to say, because this feels so similar to me when I was thinking about environmental issues in the 90s, is it's not up to you as an individual to be perfect, because your perfection will not solve the problem. It's up to you to be mindful and, say you remember to do this kind of analysis once. That's better than never doing it, right? So you don't have to consistently question every purchase, every viewing, everything. Like, that is too much for most people. So maybe it's one thing. Maybe it's the next music you buy. You'll take, while you're thinking about it, you'll take the opportunity to see where did that music originate? Where does it come from? What are the influences on it? And maybe pick up, in addition to what you're consuming, pick up an original version of it. So if you're, like, say you're consuming Latin pop and you really like a Latin pop artist, maybe go back and listen to some son music from Mexico or some mariachi music. Mm-hmm. And in that way, you're benefiting yourself as well as the people that are entertaining you in a more sustainable and authentic way. And that will feel better to you. So it's a win-win, really. It does take energy, and it does take time, and it does take money. So, but it does give you back that good feeling of I've done a bit of what I need to do today.
Yeah, the big takeaway I think I took from it was a couple of things. Like, I don't think, this is not a case of, like, something you would see on Twitter of, like, a virtue signaling person stating, I'm going to take all the white people out of my playlist. And we're not saying that. We're not telling you to be embarrassed by the music you listen to. If you like Led Zeppelin, I love Led Zeppelin. This is not, we are not doing this to knock Led Zeppelin. The point is to be introspective about the music here. So don't be embarrassed by the music that you listen to. If you like it, great, but honestly critique the artist in question. And two, to your point, go out of your way to find, because I've talked about it about movies before, like with action movies, you don't have, if you want to see women in action movies, like if you see a woman that's directed one, go see it. Just what's it going to harm you? It's not going to harm you. Even if you don't like the film, you're still supporting that person. And then, with the artists that you do like, read their articles, see if they do talk about, their musical influences. And then from there, listen to those musical influences. That's, going to be the best, because that's what I've always respected about, again, the Rolling Stones, what I've respected about the Beatles, interviews that you hear about them, they're talking all about music, whether it's white artists, black artists, whatever, they're talking about music. And, and just do what you can to be a good human being, and do what you can to open yourself up to other cultures. And just different music can touch you in different ways. And, a music from Guatemala, for instance, is going to hit me different than somebody that lives in Guatemala. But if I enjoy it, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing,
Yeah. I think it's important to keep in mind that it would be, detrimental to communities to stop consuming art and music and dance and theater. Like, that's not what we're saying. And if you look at contemporary works, say you're really into EDM, you can look at contemporary works and find, pretty obviously where the samples come from, or where the records are, what records are being played, and check out those original sources as well. For example, if you're into dance, you can do some, research about where styles of dance you like have come from, particularly in the context of hip hop, which is a largely derivative of West African styles of dance originally. But, we've got 200 years of culture on this continent in the form that we're in terms of art. And, I just really think it's important to remember that art comes from the hearts of individual people. And that creative expression is unique among creatures on the planet. I think. I don't know. It seems like maybe birds are like making patterns on the ground with their feet or something.
Or their droppings.
Or their droppings, yes. But the social and economic system that's been imposed on us wants us to tear each other apart, victimize each other, and steal from each other. And the antidote for that is love and appreciation and acceptance of other cultures, a curiosity about the world. So nobody's asking that people stop being joyful or stop consuming, things that make your life better. We're just saying, dig a little deeper. It's part of your responsibility to the community to just dig a little deeper, starting every once in a while, and see how that makes you feel. And if it makes you feel good and empowered and like you're making good choices, that's awesome. That will only bring more joy into your life.
Yeah, I mean, even if at the end of the day, there's only a couple of artists that you end up appreciating that you wouldn't have listened to before, that's still a couple of artists that you ended up discovering because you did take that time to just dig a little further, and
specifically thinking about this issue, which is from what culture did this that I am enjoying emanate? And I'm going to make sure now I'm going to go and appreciate that culture, whether that means I'm going to see a performance, I'm going to consume some online media, I'm going to go to a museum dedicated to that thing, or whatever, do some online research. What was my point?
I think I got it. I mean, I don't know what your point.
You don't know what my. You're not listening to me.
Oh, yeah, I was listening. I mean, we can go back and re-listen to that. I think it was just make an effort, really.
Oh yeah. Go and appreciate that culture, and I mean, everybody does this appropriation. Like, everybody does it, and you just have to accept that there's nothing new under the sun. But that doesn't mean you get to just steal stuff from other cultures without an understanding of that culture. I think that's the only thing. Like, don't steal other people's culture without an understanding of that culture. And yeah, sometimes people do it unwittingly, right? Like, I have a clock on my wall that has a picture of two otters snuggling on it. Mm-hmm. And when I bought it, I just thought, that's a cute picture of two otters snuggling together. And, there was nothing tipping me off that could be potentially culturally appropriative. I also have a mandala coloring book, and mm-hmm. I like to color those sometimes when I have a moment. That is incredibly culturally appropriative of any number of cultures. So when I think about what is drawing me to that, I want to find the culture that it relates to. For example, in India, in Hindu communities, they do like a sand painting thing in front of their doors where they do mandalas on the ground out of different colors of sand, and it's incredibly beautiful. It's essentially what you're doing when you're coloring mandalas, just a smaller and easier, cleaner way of doing the same thing. So, I appreciate, even just knowing where that comes from. It doesn't mean I can't enjoy coloring mandalas. It just means that didn't come to me from the publisher of that book. And so the publisher of that book isn't entitled to the social capital that comes along with me liking that culture. So I know that I have an interest in Indian culture because I like stuff that comes from Indian culture. And so I can learn more about Indian culture and, feel more connected to the art that I already like.
Yeah, I mean, let's throw out two hip-hop artist names and you'll get the point. I mean, Vanilla Ice, Eminem. I mean, Eminem, whether you like his music or not, he clearly was a student of hip-hop. And clearly respects it, clearly loves it. And again, you read his interviews, when he's talking about music, he's talking about other artists, and obviously with the other artists he's helped, produce and all that other stuff. He clearly is giving back, whereas Vanilla Ice, it was a cash grab.
Right. With Eminem, you feel like he's a part of that community. So when I'm consuming his products, whether produced or his original products or whatever, I know that I'm patronizing that community it doesn't matter what his skin color is. That's sort of not what it's about. I don't think it's necessarily about color. It's about identifying these cultural milieus. And there have been cultural milieus that have been mixed race in the United States. That doesn't mean they weren't under the same influences we all are every day related to white supremacy and capitalist culture, you know?
Yeah, my point wasn't the skin color of Vanilla Ice or Eminem. The point was, with Eminem, it was he put in the work, whereas Vanilla Ice did not, and that's the type of artist I think a person should, and I'm not saying to support Eminem, I'm saying in general, an artist, if they are taking something that is from another culture, at least support the artist that respects that other culture. That's my point.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have one last example of this, if you don't mind, and then we can, maybe wrap it up. Mm-hmm. And that is that I'm really into pole dancing. I don't know if our listeners know this yet about me, but I've been pole dancing for 2.5 years-ish, and I really enjoy it. It's a way that I really enjoy moving my body, so it is self-motivating for me, which is wonderful, and I really, really love it. It's an art form that comes to us from Black sex workers. They originated pole dancing in strip clubs, and they're the ones who have, developed over time the expertise and techniques. Like, okay, there have been pole dancers before, primarily in India, I believe, a sort of traditional dance involving climbing to the top of the pole and dancing on a pole. Mm-hmm. It's not clear whether it was the influence of that on Black sex workers, but certainly for our contemporary form of pole dancing is Black sex workers that are still around today, that we can still patronize. And so my studio that I patronize, that I pay to go to learn pole dancing and to exercise or to practice pole dancing, gives free classes to all Black sex workers. So that is a very tangible way that a group that is benefiting from the creativity of others, this dance studio that's charging money to teach people how to do this art, are giving back to the same community from which the art emanates. They also have a number of BIPOC coaches and workers there, and it's a nonprofit. It's not a profitable organization. But so that's just an example of like how that can work and feel really great. Like I feel really proud of that and really great about it. It doesn't make me feel guilty or weird or feel like defensive about the fact that I like pole dancing. It feels like it's the right thing to do, and it just feels good. So, to try to build those kinds of connections. That's what Led Zeppelin should have been doing, and what they didn't do, which I think is criticizable. I love their music. I love, I love looking at Robert Plant's dick just like everybody else. But
okay.
You know what I mean. Yeah, I think this has been a really interesting conversation.
About Robert Plant's dick. Yeah, but remember, I've been closer to it than you.
Yes, I have stayed as far away from it as I could.
Yeah. Oh, man. I think that is a good note to end it on. Just, at the end of the day, just we're a big world. Lots of people living on it. It is easy to forget that, because when you're in your own little community there, that's the only thing that you can honestly, even though you got a TV, you got a computer, and you know there is an outside world, your brain can only really appreciate what's in your immediate vicinity. So, taking time out of your day to, be empathetic, be a good human, and also to in the ways that you can try and right some wrongs, go ahead and do that, and just, yeah.
Yeah, and just have fun. And so, the review take home is if you're tired, don't watch The Song Remains the Same, but
Well, no. If you're tired, it'll put you to sleep faster.
Oh, okay. There you go. If you need something to put you to sleep, give The Song Remains the Same a try. And what's the name of that YouTuber?
The channel is called Polyphonic. Like I said, I can't recommend that channel enough. He puts good quality, bite-sized documentaries that are properly sourced about this music, about music in general. He doesn't just talk about Led Zeppelin. He's talking about all different types of popular music genres. So
cool, awesome. Well, shout out to them.
Yep. Yeah, so I think we'll wrap it up then. We'll thank you all for listening every Wednesday and Saturday. We'll have something in this podcast space to entertain your ear holes. Until we meet again, we bid you adieu.
Good day, mate.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.